Hi, this is David Thornburg, President and CEO of the Committee of 70, Philadelphia's long-standing civic leadership organization that engages voters in the voting process and advocates for better government here in Philadelphia and Pennsylvania. We have an election coming up on May 21st. The way we look at it, running for office is a job interview. So between now and then, and certainly even as we speak, it's a chance for candidates to go talk to voters who ultimately make the decision about who's hired, who's fired, or who's retained. In that light, joining us is City Council at Large member Allan Domb, who is running for re-election. And thanks for being with us.
Thank you,
He's
David.
running as a Democrat, if you hadn't figured that out. And we're going to spend about 15 minutes talking with Councilman Domb about his goals, his vision, his experience, and where we go from here. So let me start with the most basic, fundamental question that every interview like this probably begins with. In this case, why are you running for re-election?
So I'm running for re-election to continue the work I've done in my first 3.5 years or so, and that is to make Philadelphia the best it can be, and to change our city dramatically, to take people out of poverty, and to really address it. People talk about poverty. We've been talking about poverty for 70 years. We really haven't made a big dent in the poverty issue. And a few things that I've been working on, I think, can make a big dent. I'm happy to share them with you, during the interview.
Mm-hmm.
But you're talking about job interview, and when you're interviewing people, because I've had a lot of experience in the private sector of interviewing, I always look for 3 things in any job interview, and I call it SAM, S-A-M, stability, ability, and maturity.
I'll borrow those.
Okay. So anyone I'm interviewing, I say that they have SAM,
Mm-hmm.
and I feel many people, by the way, when I first ran, said, "Oh, you're too old to be in council." Okay, and I would say this: the knowledge that I've gained over my career and the business acumen I have and dealing with people is invaluable. I didn't have that 20 years ago or 25 years ago. I have it today. And I think that's been a great tool for me in looking at the city's budget, which is now at $5 billion,
Mm-hmm.
up from $4.150 billion 4 years ago, 21% increase in 4 years. And then looking at our capital projects, and now looking at our school budget, which is $3.2 billion. And at the end of the day, this job interview is really not just about what you're going to do for the city, but understanding as a member of council, one of 17, you approve that budget. And we have to make sure that the taxpayers' dollars are invested efficiently and help as many people as possible.
Mm-hmm. So you mentioned this earlier. This is a time when we hear a lot about this, I hope to good effect, which is that we've gotten used to talking about Philadelphia as the poorest big city in this country. And as you point out, this has been true one way, shape, or form for decades. This is not a just happened last week kind of a problem. So this is persistent, deep-rooted, structural challenge that we have in the city.
Right.
So one response to that probably could be like, forget about it. I don't know what to do about it. But I have a sense that you maybe have a few ideas about how we can move the needle.
So I think this is our biggest problem, and our biggest goal, in my opinion, is to take people, at least 50 to 100,000 people, out of poverty over the next several years. And we have to change. There's several steps. One, the best way out of poverty is a great job. Clearly, that's the best thing. We have many people 18 to 50 that do not have a job or do not have a good job. And in the big picture, it's education and it's job training and job opportunities, which also means businesses coming here, more job opportunities. Dave, let me give you a few facts. I'm going to talk about education also. From 2010 to 2017, of the 81% of the people who left Philadelphia, they did not have children. 19% had children who left our city.
Meaning it's not just about schools.
It's not about schools. 81% left. The number one reason they left, taxes. The second reason they left were job opportunities. Every day in Philadelphia, 211,000 people commute outside of the city to a job in the suburbs. 40% of our Philadelphia population leaves the city by some form of transportation and goes to a suburban job.
Is that unusual?
New York City is 15%. That's highly unusual. So now we have all these factors. And one of these reasons why this is happening is the wealth of this region is not in the city. 19106, which is probably the wealthiest zip code in the city, compared to Gwinnett Valley, it's $157,000 on average less than Gwinnett Valley. The reason why these jobs are in the suburbs: one, city wage tax; Two, the BERT taxes, whether it's the net income or the gross receipts. They need to be addressed. The second piece, though, besides just making sure businesses are here, what we should be doing is knocking on the door of every business in the suburb and saying to them, we want you here. What will it take to bring you here? We want you to open a second office or move your main office. Whatever we need to do, we need to bring them here. Because one thing we have going for us, we have the millennials and the baby boomers who do want to live urban. I don't know any millennial who says to me, I can't wait to move to Wayne, Pennsylvania. That's just not happening. Okay, they want to stay in the city. We have the talent. Now we have to bring the businesses here.
Yeah.
On the education front, 3 years ago, I'm a big proponent of financial literacy. And I think it should be taught pre-K to 12th grade. I tried to make it happen. I wasn't successful through the school system. So I went to the Federal Reserve. And we have a great asset here, the Federal Reserve at 6th and Market.
Yeah.
Dr. Andrew Hill, who's at the Federal Reserve, put together financial literacy training courses for our teachers. And I've now sponsored 122 public school teachers that have taken the courses at the Federal
With your
Reserve.
own money?
With my own money. That have taken the courses at the Federal Reserve. We're now teaching today between 3,000 and 3,500 high school, public school students, pre-K to 12th grade. They even have a course called Kiddonomics for 4-year-olds. Hancock Elementary in the Northeast is the first Philadelphia public school, K through 5, that's financially literacy certified, meaning every teacher K through 5 has taken the class. I went to a 3rd grade class there to observe it, and the kids were being taught how to make a profit selling cupcakes, for example. They're learning great skills.
We had a candy store in 3rd grade.
You get it. Those are good examples.
There's a massive theft problem at some point, but until we got there, it was a very useful
You needed
learning
better inventory
exercise.
controls.
Yes, exactly.
But the other goal I had was to teach technology and coding. And so what I've done with Sylvester Mobley, who has a company called Coded by Kids, I've supported 4 public high schools. I have business leaders support 21. We now have 25 public high schools in Philadelphia teaching coding in the 10th, 11th, and 12th grade. We have 375 kids in the program. Dr. Height saw this happening, and actually, which is a great thing. He's been great, by the way, Dr. Height. I'm a full supporter of Dr. Height. I think he's doing a great job. He's put into 3 high schools coding, which is great. And so 2 months ago, I met with Governor Wolf, met with Congressman Evans. They were both supportive of what I'm going to share with you now. And that is I put in a resolution in council, supported by all my colleagues in council. They all supported it. I asked the state to do 4 things for us. 1, we want mandatory financial literacy in our public schools pre-K to 12th grade. Mandatory technology and coding in our schools pre-K to 12th grade. 3, we want to teach entrepreneurship, and I'll tell you why in a second. 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th, 11th, and 12th grade. And 4, we want to give kids the option of working 1 day a week in a job, 9th, 10th, 11th, and 12th grade, and going to school for 4 days. So it's like Cristo Rey, but count that as credit. Why entrepreneurship is so important to be taught. In the city of Philadelphia, 78.8% of our businesses are owned by white people. 10% are owned by Asian. 2.4 African American, yet our population is 41%. We need to teach people how to create wealth. And so,
well, let me. Have to say, particularly the last issues near and dear to my heart over the years. I was a founder of the Enterprise Center out in 46 and Market.
So you know it.
Focused on just that premise. Sadly, the numbers have moved. That was the early 1990s. And the numbers haven't moved that much. So that's the magnitude of the challenge. But let me talk to you about your role within council, because you're not short of ideas. But one job of a council member, as one of 17, is to whip the votes, to do what you need to do to get to 9, magic number 9, and then if you have 9, you probably have the mayor.
That's right.
So what have you learned about that process? You come from a business background, an entrepreneurial background, probably a little different than dealing with this
Government,
group, with government. But what have you learned about that process that might make you think like I could pull this off on any one of these plans, tax reform or teaching entrepreneurship or whatever?
So I've passed 9 bills in my first term. And what I have learned is that contrary to what maybe people thought, council members work a lot harder than people think they do. They're out there all the time working. I see them. They are a hardworking group of people. And when you sit down with them, they understand the issues and you can work with them. Some of the bills I passed, for example, I passed the bill because when we purchased the Inquirer building even though they're calling it a lease. We have a purchase there. We never got an appraisal, so I passed a bill requiring us to have an appraisal. That was used at 46 in Market when we sold that property. I passed a bill called a fiscal impact study that says on any legislation, anyone can raise their hand and say, give me the fiscal analysis on that particular legislation, including jobs gained and jobs lost. Last April, I raised my hand. I was the one who raised my hand and said, where is this 33 million that's unaccounted for? And more importantly, I raised my hand and said, why are there 7 accounts going back to 2010, some 7 years, that haven't been balanced or reconciled, totaling a lot of money? I put in a bill to make sure that that would never happen again. So we have now a reconciliation for council, a report every month. And by the way, to the administration's credit, they appointed a task force. They have found, of the 33 million, everything but about $500,000, which is good. And they've reconciled about 99.9% of the accounts.
Are you confident that we have put in place, this wasn't just a one-time fix, hurry up, task force, whatever, but is this going to happen again?
Well, I'm confident they have it fixed, but the reason why I put a bill in where they have to give a monthly report to the council of every account reconciled, every account not reconciled, what checks are outstanding. So now we have a system of checks and balances in place for the council. But it's really, the administration's responsibility. But this goes back prior to the Kenny administration. It goes back years. And so I think in general, it's good. It's just good financial management for the city of Flow.
Okay. Let me ask you, the last sort of bucket of questions is around the political process, everything from councilman prerogative. I know you came out in favor of term limits a few weeks ago. If you're reelected, it will be on your watch that council districts are redrawn after the next census. We believe that ought to be a more open, inclusive, citizen-driven process. There's the transparency of the way council itself manages its money and manages the flow of bills and amendments. Our view, there's a lot of work to be done there. So I'm just curious on where you are on all of that, because this is pretty fundamental in our view to really sending a signal that people ought to dig into local democracy.
So I would say, look, I introduced the term limit bill, and I believe in the term limits for city council. And I grandfathered everybody who was there. And of the 10 largest cities in the country, 8 of them have term limits. Right. Only Chicago and Philadelphia do not. And I'm going to continue to push for that. That's number one. I also introduced legislation that I was the only one on the bill. And that was to eliminate, for future hires, just want to make sure I'm clear, for future hires, non-represented, the DROP program, the Deferred Retirement Option Program, because it has cost the city money. And to the average taxpayer, it is something that is not, they're not a fan of.
Big numbers that don't make any sense.
Right. So, and that hasn't gone anywhere. I would say probably, sadly for me, I probably introduced more bills, 2 on tax collection, DROP, term limits, that haven't had a hearing. But you have to work around it too. And I would say that I don't understand right now how some of these districts are handled. Like I just don't get it. It seems to me like there could be a better way to do that. And I'll tell you what else I'm not happy about, and that is the process of how we pick our ballots. It seems to me that should be automated or randomized. It should be a different system. I'm happy.
Well, we agree with you there.
Yeah, I would. If you give me the right system, I'm happy to introduce legislation to make it happen. The one good thing about me, David, is that I'm only there for one reason. That is to make it better. And I'm not tied to anybody, because no one can tell me what to do. Because I answer to our children and grandchildren. And the best example is the Inquirer building. I negotiated a loan on the Inquirer building that was 3.75% fixed for 19 years. A great rate. Now, the administration did not take it. They took a 4.03 adjustable. But I did that because it might have cost us $3 or $4 million in the short term. Over the long term, it could save us $100 to $200 million. And I think of things in the long term.
Yeah. Let me ask you one more question, which is unique to you. I would say, my view, somewhat sadly, but it's unique to you among council members, in that you're a business person. You continue to have a successful business with your name on it. Questions have arisen time to time. I get calls from reporters. I'm sure you get the same calls about potential conflicts of interests, or how does Councilman Domb keep his business and his political interests straight? How do you respond to that particular challenge?
I'm probably the most frequent caller of the ethics board, and I constantly ask them questions on every issue. There have been many votes that I've recused myself on, even though I could have voted. I recused myself. I try to keep myself totally clear of any conflict, and I rely on our ethics. We have a great ethics board at the city, and I rely on them. You can probably call them and ask them. I'm probably the most frequent caller to have questions answered on if there's an issue or not.
Yeah.
You know, on a lot of my issues, though, I think what people don't realize is that I operate from my heart and what I think is right for the city. You know, people think I'm a supporter of the abatement. In reality, personally, the abatement hurts me. No one really thought it through. I don't really build new buildings. I have existing buildings. And when new buildings are built, the supply goes into the market, which affects the existing buildings. But I believe the abatement's good because it creates jobs for our city. I voted for the beverage tax, even though I have interest in restaurants. And so I'm not voting for me personally. I vote based on what's best for the city.
Good. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you.
Best of luck to you in your
Thank you very
second go
much.
around. I'm sure it's you learn something new every day.
And I want to give a shout out to the Committee of 70. You guys do a great job.
Oh, thank you.
Really,
We'll
really
do our
good.
best.
It's very good.
As I said at the outset, there is an election, a primary election on May 21st. So right now, if you haven't, make a plan to vote. Share that with your friends, your kids, your neighbors, your relatives, people you go to church with, whatever. If you want to learn more about the election coming up, take a look at our website, 70.org, where you can find our world-class voter guide. You can also download our We Vote app to your phone, which will put in your hand everything you need to know about candidates, elections, issues, and allow you to select your own ballot, take it with you to the polls, share it with your friends and neighbors, and be well equipped and well informed for the primary election. So thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you at the polls. There we go.
Thank you.